All right. Bergson and the Holographic Theory of Mind, returning to this, part 41. Bernardo Kastrup and his idealism theory, or psychedelic idealism. And we'll be looking at this theory then as he's restated it in a new book. I like to call it a universe with a personality disorder, or namely his basic framework. Another piece of this framework is the quantum argument and the psychedelic argument. Now, Bernardo issues a parsimony challenge, saying even though his theory, shall we say, contains a lot you have to buy, is it not more parsimonious than anyone else's? Like, well, he doesn't know about Bergson, and Bergson wins hands down. So Bernardo has written a new work on idealism, as I noted. 2019. He has a PhD in computer engineering. He's worked at CERN, has just obtained another PhD, I believe it's in philosophy. He's written 8 books. He's a guy on a mission, particularly against physicalism, or physicalism, roughly defined as he puts it, all is composed of particles, which are like featureless little billiard balls clashing together. I've discussed Bernardo previously in number 21, specifically with reference to the More Than Allegory book of 2016. To me, he's probably modified things and presents an interesting challenge now. Nevertheless, idealism's new resurgence is rooted in the deficient understanding of realism, that is, Bergson's presentation of realism as it should be. The idea book contains 3 sections of argument: the general framework for this theory, the QM justification or QM related justification, and the neuroscience related justification, to include the operation of psychedelics. So, let's go. Bernardo denies a certain idea of idealism, particularly one that sees idealism as solipsism, where the world is your individual dream. You're dreaming the piano falls on your head, or you get hit by the golf ball. For idealism, truly, he argues, the whole universe is mind, not just in your individual psyche. The world, or the outside world, is indeed outside your individual mentation or thought, but it's not outside mind. Now, I know there would seem an oscillation on this in my number 21, for we saw statements in the 2016 book that sure looked like a solipsistic position, for example. But it is you, through your human thinking, who is creating the whole of it now, now, and now. So you're creating the beavers chomping on you. So 2019 is a bit clearer, and we'll see this pictured right off. For Bernardo's general framework, you can't beat his own picture. The TWE is that which experiences. To quote, experience necessarily entails a subjective field of potential or actualized qualities. He says it's an ontological primitive, uncaused, irreducible. Shades of this classic, the theologians Thomas Aquinas. Can't resist that comment. And it's associated with the entire universe. So the entire universe is the TWE. His main motivation for all of this is going to be the unsolvability of the hard problem in his mind. No one can solve the hard problem. That is, nothing can explain experience. Yep, that is, nothing can explain our image of stirring the coffee out there external to us on the table, as we've been talking about. The physicalist framework, the clashing billiard balls, nope, you can't derive experience from simple clashing billiard balls. Panpsychism, combining little conscious particles, little conscious billiard balls, nope, no one can explain how putting these together makes a consciousness like a rat. Another motivation, the field is experience, that is, the universe He argues has a brain-like structure. And he quotes a study saying the universe at large scale, with all of its stars, galaxies, etc., shows structure similar to biological brains. Now, of course, one asks right away, if the universe is a giant brain, what is it looking at? Well, he says, nothing. It's just thought. In my opinion, this is a deep misconception about thought in the first place. But we're not going to hit that. But in any case, later in the book, page 149, he says information integration at this scale, the universal scale, very implausible. So he never really resolves these two statements, one being an actual motivation for this thing and another being the denial of that motivation. So whence the alter? Well, actually, we're all alters. The mechanism is dissociation. That is, dissociation of various personalities within the TWE. Think multiple personality disorder. Each personality, or alter, is independent of the others, is totally unaware of the others. So this invoking of dissociation as a mechanism allows there to be a universal, unitary TWE, but filled with apparently separate private experience alters. As all in TWE is thought, all can be said in Bernardo's terms to be intrinsic. So the question is, whence the boundaries for extrinsic alters, such that each of us appears extrinsic to the other? We're not all one in one big field. Well, for Bernardo, it is metabolizing organisms that become extrinsic manifestations of TWE. These have a what it is like experience or aspect to their experience. That is, they have a phenomenal aspect. What it is like is from Nagel's 1974 formulation of the hard problem and phenomenal experience, an article entitled, "What is it like to be a bat?" That is, what is the phenomenal experience of a bat? Okay, now for perception. Remember, Bernardo's model of the origin of the image of the truly external world. That's the true question of perception. How do we see the coffee cup out there? How does that image obtained, specified? Well, for Bernardo, perceptions carry extrinsic appearances, not thoughts, for they're intrinsic. In other words, perception is an extrinsic appearance of, well, the coffee cup out there, external to us, extrinsic. So what he needs to show is that perceptions still equal thoughts of the TWE. Therefore, they're all still intrinsic. No problem, for in the TWE, all was and is thought. So the formation of the first alter, he says, formed a boundary between experience within an alter and that outside. The boundary enabled perceptions to arise. So TWE's thoughts stimulated the boundary from outside, he said. These impinged on the alter's internal dynamics. So perception, seeing that coffee cup, is equivalent to the experiences of the TWE impinging from the outside. So continuing this notion of perception as the experience of the TWE impinging from the outside, to quote, even if the outside stimulation is very faint and subtle, evolution has had billions of years to optimize the sensitivity of our sense organs, our alter's boundaries, to pick up on these hypothetically faint signals. Now the language, faint, subtle signals. It's a curious transformation in favor of his conception, idealism, because, well, in reality, we're talking about patterns of the flow of light on the receptors, on the retina, or mechanical forces carried in haptic flow or kinesthetic flow of the arms as we're stirring that coffee, angular momenta carried in that flow, energies or ratios of energies, and oscillation, frequency of energy. So this is a curious and subtle transformation in reality toward a view. But to move on, Bernardo asks, how can outside experiences dissociated from the altar cause experiences inside the altar? So, oops, we've got to change our picture, because that perception is inside the altar, not out there in the external world. So it's in all the other altars, seeing that coffee stirring, inside the altar. So his answer, it's via the mechanics of dissociation. I'm having trouble at home with the wife, with the husband. I go to work. I park the problems. I'm now unaware of them, but they still are acting. They still have an effect. For example, bad decisions. I'm grumpy. I snap at my coworkers. I smash my computer. So this is his model, the analogy. These dissociated feelings from the altar, so to speak, are having an effect on us nevertheless in our work self. And so he says, something analogous to this happens across the boundary of dissociated altars of TWE, now extending this to the universe, causing perceptions. And this is in truth his entire model for the image of that coffee cup. But our picture isn't yet correct. To quote, the qualities of our perceptions, color, shapes, sounds, flavors, textures, etc., are not the qualities of the experiences of TWE that surround the altar, but their desktop representations instead. In this he invokes Hoffman's user interface theory, which we discussed totally in number 38. What we see is not what is actually in the external field, that coffee cup, but rather a representation tuned only to our survival needs. Again, I note here, for Bergson, this would have been tuned to our action capabilities, virtual action. We'll get back to that. Like an icon, he's invoking Hoffman's icon, a metaphor. Like an icon on a desktop. For example, the trash bin, which serves to destroy files, but is far from the reality of the code and all the structure of computer code behind the bin. But it's a nice icon metaphor. So, in reality, we don't know what the coffee cup looks like in the thoughts of the altar, nor the trash bin. We have the question mark. What is it? He goes on to say, our perceptions do not feel like the thoughts of TWE because a qualitative transition between these two experiential categories has helped our ancestors survive and reproduce. Again, invoking Hoffman's evolutionary tuning theory, shall we say. So no, we have this qualitative transition that occurs between whatever it is and those thoughts, experiences, whatever they look like, to the coffee cup inside the altar. Very important. That qualitative transition carries his whole theory. And he says, qualities of perception experienced by an altar are just compressed, coded representations of how surrounding thoughts of TWE actually feel. In other words, they're a coded representation like an icon. The coffee cup's just an icon, like the trash bin. Thoughts of TWE actually feel. Bernardo's trying to solve the hard problem, understood, as he understands it, as whence qualia. And since the TWE is entirely experience, qualia it's also feels. So for him, the hard problem is solved because he's just shown that, hey, TWE is all thoughts, experience, it's all quality in the first place. I just need this little qualitative transition to have yet more qualities, just the coffee cup inside the altar. So now the question, how all altars share an experience? Well, that's trivial. It's all just the TWE. To quote, it follows trivially that we can explain our shared universe based on excitations of TWE alone. That is why we would all see the coffee cup. Or why everyone sees the poor kid getting eaten by the beavers. It's just a standard TWE excitation. And everyone happens to be sharing that. This actually is just a restatement of Berkeley, the original idealist. To quote, the reason that objectivity exists, that different individuals continually perceive a similar world, all three of the altars seeing the beaver there, and that a reliable order inheres that world. So there's an order in the beaver's chomping, all the mechanics involved in even chomping down, is that the world and its order depend on a mind that transcends individual minds and is universal, namely God's mind. That's precisely what's being presented here. Okay, but is this a theory of perception any more than Berkeley's? The obvious mystery, the qualitative transition, the question marks, what's in the TWE field transitioning to an actual image of coffee being stirred. The question marks atoms, Bernardo notes, subatomic particles are coded representations of the smallest discernible quote-unquote movements of TWE. So how do you get the image of the coffee cup? And what does the brain actually have to do with it? What does impingement actually mean? This is actually a revision of the good old hard problem, but towards how I state it. The standard statement of the hard problem is, how do you account for qualia? How does a neural structure of the brain account for qualia? How does a computer architecture account for qualia? Me, more generally put as a problem, how to account for the image of the external world. Bernardo says, I've accounted for the qualia. TWE is all qualia. To which I say, nice, Bernardo, you've accounted for qualia. Now you see why you have to account for the image. You have no model of your qualitative transition. It's obvious that there is structure in those question marks. The coffee stirring has all of that structure I've been insisting on through this whole series, and the invariant structure, velocity flow fields, adiabatic ratios, inertial tensors, and the haptic flow field, acoustical invariance, etc. This structure in that external event would account for the sharing across the altars in that picture. They're all responding to the same structure, not via invoking the TWE, the God's mind. But for BK, such structure is irrelevant. Really? You've never heard of Gibson? So, Ray, those invariance laws, I've noted that they hold across scales of time, or in relativistic terms, across space-time partitions. In special relativity, the law, distance equal velocity times time, or t prime equal vt prime, holds whether at rest partition on the Earth or in the moving partition on the rocket. It's an invariance law. It holds across space-time partitions. Each of those observers has a different space-time partition. It's why you must have them for perception. Why is that? Again, the energy state of the brain, as I've been saying, specifies the field, that universal field at a scale of time. A buzzing-like fly versus a heron-like fly. Analogous to a space-time partition, or two different space-time partitions there. But the same laws, invariance laws, are specifying each, the buzzing fly versus the heron-like fly. Or again, aging, the aging of a face. A strain transformation, the invariance law is a strain transformation in the cardioid, that heart-shaped figure. Strain, put it on a matrix there, and expand it in all directions, and you have a strain transformation. And that specifies the aging of the face. As you strain that cardioid, the face ages. So this is slow transformation at normal rate for us. It's a very slow, but it can be also very fast. You can see little Joey growing up before your eyes. The same law is specifying the transformation of the facial profile. So that TWE, field of thought, it clearly has structure. It can be specified at different scales of time with the same structure invariance holds. If you actually recognize the structure in this field to account for shared perceptions, the need for the omni-thinking TWE, namely the God, is gone. And you can have shared experience. Everyone sees the Titanic go down because of the laws specifying that sinking. Now, Bernardo argued that given the unsolvability of the hard problem, just in case you happen to think the hard problem is solvable, why compare your solution to his for parsimony? He said, see whose solution is most parsimonious. Okay. Now I got to review Bergson real quick again for those who have been watching the series. I have to do so for any Kastrupians who just happen to be arriving here. I made the mistake in not doing this review for the Orc-Or and the Bohm piece, which tons of people watch, but I didn't really do any review of Bergson, which was a mistake. So Bergson and the hard problem, for parsimony's sake. The field, for Bernardo's TWE thought field, substitute Bergson's indivisibly transforming in time holographic field. This field is qualitative, even at the null scale, the most minute, infinitely small scale of time. It's still qualitative, as we've discussed. The brain is a modulated reconstructive wave passing through this holographic field and specific to a source within this field by this process an image of a subset of the field. As I note again, the modulating reconstructive wave in the top corner there, if I'm passing a reconstructive wave of frequency 1 through that holographic plate, and there's an object wave interference pattern for a coffee cup, then the coffee cup is specified, the source of that object wave, the coffee cup is specified to the observer. But I can modulate that wave out to frequency 2 and specify now a wine glass, another interference pattern recorded on that wave. If I modulate it to frequency 3, I see the cube, and I can modulate back to frequency 1 and see the cup. In other words, I can modulate the reconstructive wave to specify various sources or wave fronts recorded on that plate. So the brain is a modulated reconstructive wave is specifying the fly at a scale of time due to its dynamics. The chemical velocities underlying that reconstructive wave within the field. Now that source, the fly, is right where it says it is, external, within the field, not in the brain. And it's to a past extent of the indivisibly transforming field, made possible by the indivisibility of this transformation. It's not instant after instant after instant, discrete instant after discrete instant. The scale of time via the brain's dynamics. its underlying energy state or chemical velocities is specifying the field as a scale of time, as I noted. Could be more like a heron, like flapping his wings, driving the modulation, the invariant structure of the transforming event, as in the coffee stirring. All those invariance laws are driving that very complex modulation state of the brain as a reconstructive wave. Subject and object. The relation of subject and object in terms of this framework. The holographic field has an elementary awareness defined throughout at the null scale of time, at this infinitely small scale of time, because each point, so-called in the field, reflects the influence of the whole. Thus an elementary awareness of the whole. And it has an elementary memory, for the field is transforming indivisibly, melodically, not instant to instant. The specification of that image of the fly then is simultaneously a specification of a time-scaled form of this elementary awareness related to the body and its possible action. That is, there is no homunculus looking at this field. Subject differentiates from object in terms of time, as Bergson said, not space. If I raise the energy state, the fly becomes a heron-like fly. Raise it more, the fly is stationary, stuck still. Raise it yet more, the fly is now a pile of atoms, ensemble of electrons. Raise it yet more, and it's now just a very amorphous field. But so is the body. There is no differentiation in terms of space. What we've just seen differentiating is subject and object in terms of time. Run it the other direction, run that transformation the other direction, and subject and object reemerge. So Bernardo's two problems. Bottom-up panpsychism's attempt to create larger consciousnesses. The combination problem, it's fixed. We're not combining little conscious particles into larger consciousnesses. The second problem is physicalist realism, where everything is via little billiard ball particles. Well, let's look at this realism problem. Bernardo's billiard balls. These are natural denizens of the classic metaphysic, the metaphysic of space and time that Bergson critiqued. The metaphysic involves the continuum of points, positions, an infinitely divisible continuum. Motion in this continuum is point to point, point after point after point, and each point corresponds to an instant of time. So what we have is an abstract space, a four-dimensional space where one dimension is time, the time of discrete instants. So a cube of all of this space, moving time to time to time, space to space to space, instant to instant, with the time extent of a mathematical point for each one, the end result of the infinite division, if possible, would be utterly homogeneous. No qualities possible of space or of time. Homogeneous space. And remember, there's never more than one of these spaces at an instant. So any quality developing over time is impossible. So Hardcastle's qualia examples, for example, the patrons shifting in their seats, the musicians concentrating, the curtains ever so gently waving. This is impossible in this metaphysic, for it requires a building indivisible transformation of the field. But Bernardo's time is still the series of instantaneous nows. You're creating a whole of it. Now, now, now. This is expression of his model of time. He does not understand the metaphysic underlying the billiard balls. Bergson's temporal metaphysic, a melodic, indivisibly transforming field where time is not a series of discrete instants. This is the metaphysic that realism belongs in. Now, truthfully, we could exhaust ourselves on the problematic aspects of Bernardo's framework. Bergson sought to resolve idealism and realism, to seek a middle way, which preserves common sense. My consciousness of matter, in his framework then, is no longer subjective as in English idealism, because the consciousness is in things rather than in me. It is that My perception is indeed external within that dynamically transforming, elementarily conscious field. Nor is it relative, that is as inconscient idealism, because the relation between phenomenal and thing is not of appearance to reality, but merely a part to the whole. The image is merely a specification of, as it were, of a part of the whole field, the holographic field with all its information. Nor is it based on billiard balls, as in standard realism. The holographic field, plus its indivisible melodic transformation, is a temporal metaphysic, and it's a new basis for realism. But common sense, we'll see, is a problematic commodity. So this brings us to the quantum argument. Bernardo contends that recent experiments show that the physical world is contextual. Its measurable properties do not exist before being observed. The golf ball's momentum would not exist until it's observed, apparently by the back of the head. The piano mass would not exist until observed by, well, a crushed body. Realism, he says, entails that the world should have objective physical properties. He approvingly invokes R.C. Henry in an article in Nature 2005. The universe is entirely mental. Properties exist only in perception. And Bernardo says, there is no other ontological ground outside mind where these properties could reside otherwise. Bernardo follows Carlo Rovelli's interpretation of quantum theory, the relational interpretation. To quote, by embracing contextuality, the relational interpretation regards every property of the physical world as relative to the observer. This is analogous to how the speed of a particle with mass is always relative to its observer. To go on, quote, like the Copenhagen interpretation, quantum mechanics Copenhagen interpretation, the relational interpretation entails that A, physical quantities are products of observation. They do not exist until observed. But most significantly, it goes further by asserting that B, the world is relational. And observation does not create a world shared by everyone, but just the world of that particular observer. Now, firstly, this view of special relativity. This is the ubiquitous misinterpretation. Length, time are not relative to the motions of observers. These properties do not change ontologically, physically, in reality. In special relativity's consistent form, logically consistent, length and time are invariant to all observers. The changes are simply measurement effects. And again, I've noted several times a measurement effect. I measure my toaster. I have a ruler that says 5.5 inches. Another ruler exactly the same length, 9 inches. Is the toaster expanding or contracting from 5 inches to 9 inches to 5 inches, etc.? Obviously not. It's purely an effective measurement. And in SR's case, the rulers are simply clocks and light rays. Same difference. So for SR to explain Michelson-Morley, the arm contraction, the arm pointing toward the direction of the ether, has to be a measurement effect only. It cannot be a real effect. It cannot be a real contraction, just like the toaster contraction is real. Otherwise, the explanation for Michelson-Morley falls apart, and the Earth becomes stationary again. The misconception that SR explains real effects and that somehow these effects are relative, these properties are relative to observer motion is so drilled in, what I've just said sounds impossible. Again, take mass, in the previous quote. To be consistent, this quantity should change as well, depending on whether you're at rest or in motion. That is, it should also be a measurement effect to be consistent. But this is obviously absurd. With its increased mass, the fly blasts through a building and destroys it. To say he was at rest and the building is moving is now absurd. The building is gone. It's destroyed. It's a real ontological effect that cannot be denied, no matter what your logical structure is. In truth, you can arrange the same kind of physically, as concrete, contradictory situations for length and time as well. Only at a level of abstraction is SR even consistent. For example, there's the pole-barn paradox. Physics uses it as a parable to emphasize that these effects are only measurement effects. That is, only the length effect, as far as it's concerned, is a measurement effect, because they need that for Michelson-Morley. So at rest, a pole is too long to fit in a barn. But in motion, it shrinks and fits in the barn. But then they say, but physics is, but the barn can be put in motion too. And then the barn shrinks and the pole no longer fits. The pole shrinking, therefore, is not ontological. It's simply a measurement effect, and that's their parable. Except the problem is, one could easily think of experiments where you could prove that the pole in motion would contract and fit in the barn. You would need a very precise, instantaneously closing apparatus to show that the pole was in a barn-like structure, but you could do it. They just don't want to, because it shows the inconsistency. Same thing is true for time retardations. In fact, but that's another whole story. But remember, time and length are reciprocal. One shrinks as the other expands, and you cannot divorce them and say one is measurement and one is ontological, real. Can't do it. So SR actually cannot be consistent, save at a certain level of abstraction. That SR even explains Michelson-Morley is beyond doubtful. So SR does not imply actually relative properties, ontologically relative properties. Cannot. But worse, the mess that is SR underlies the downfall of the ether. The ether in turn held a dielectric field. Critical in the view of Steinmetz, Tesla, Heaviside, Maxwell is underlying electromagnetism, a subject with progress strangely halted, as we've noted. Yet, when you look at quantum computing, the deeper you look at quantum computing, it becomes but an effort to treat EM phenomenon or phenomena at the quantized level. That is to horse electromagnetic phenomena into behaving controllably at the minutely tiny, inherently unstable quantum scale. That is, we're still really actually dealing with electromagnetism. So Bernardo can certainly explore this, but just saying, the actual state of quantum mechanics, even its origins, are so shaky. Here's to Hooft, Gerard to Hooft, Nobel Prize. But the strange thing about it is that despite the fact that QM is so successful at describing the subatomic world that we know, it nevertheless doesn't describe anything that looks like reality. That is, water properties do not exist until somebody observes the water. The teeth mass of the beavers doesn't exist until somebody observes it. Can we see now the why of Bergson's goal to preserve common sense? Quantum mechanics can explain the QM to classical transition. So throwing QM into the framework of idealism, especially when your framework has no solution to the hard problem in actuality, you cannot explain the image of the external world, and you haven't actually penetrated into the metaphysic at the core of the problem, your billiard ball understanding is woefully insufficient. It isn't going to help either QM or idealism. So let's go to psychedelics. Bernardo's main argument. Neuroimaging studies of the psychedelic state show, firstly, broad reductions in brain activity. Yet the experiences are very rich, vivid, impactful. But physicalism implies that subjective experience is entirely constituted by brain activity. So that glorious mountain with the glorious sunset there that our guy has seen is all created by and caused by neural activity in the brain. But the results of 1 and 2, reductions in brain activity, rich experiences, do not fit this implication. Poor physicalism. And kind of by implication, in the section in which Bernardo was writing this, idealism, yay, because this seems to support idealism. I joke a bit here. Actually, this is a cool observation, an argument by Bernardo, causing terror and confusion among the physicalists, but not Bergson. This is what we're going to see. His principle in matter and memory. Psychical states infinitely overflow the state of the brain. Or said again, mental states infinitely overflow the state of the brain. Or experience infinitely overflows the state of the brain. Why? Because the origin of this is already in the nature of the specification of the image of the external world. That is, that reconstructive wave is specific to a portion of the external field, right where it says it is. Experience, the image of the coffee cup, is not in the brain, which, by the way, is why it can't be stored there, and why we'll be showing a four-dimensional memory in subsequent slides. The two studies Bernardo refers to. One is the effects of psilocybin, the other the effects of LSD. In the first, in psilocybin, despite significantly higher richness of experience, cerebral blood flow, the measure thereof, only shows a reduction of neural activity. There is no increase of CBF anywhere in the brain. In LSD, number two, localized increases in CBF are observed in the visual cortex only, but MEG, magnetoencephalography, a more direct measure of neural activity, shows reduction throughout the brain. The authors essentially argue that the CBF finding should be ignored. In other words, just go with the general reduction throughout the brain. Ignore the visual cortex increase. So, we'll come back to this. Again, this is all very counterintuitive to the physicalist framework. Bernardo quotes Christoph Koch, a big-name neuroscientist. Quote, to the great surprise of many, psilocybin, a potent psychedelic, reduces brain activity. Bernardo, in his analysis of physicalism, insists an increase in richness of experience requires an increase in metabolism associated with the neural correlates of consciousness, NCCs. For experiences are constituted by these neural correlates, in other words, neural activity. He keys on physicalism's tie to Shannon information, the old 1-0 bits. Watching a fireworks display entails more information. Listening to the Brandenburg concertos entails more information than sitting in a relatively silent room because one can discern more tones, rhythms, timbres, and levels of volume. Richer experience entails more information and awareness. So Bernardo disposes of two arguments to rescue physicalism. The first argument, fMRI isn't fine-grained enough. Nope, that's not true. Second argument, this rich psychedelic experience is actually baseline neural activity. This is truly implausible. For even a trivial dream, like a dream where you're staring at a bronze statue, increased neural activity can be detected. So as I've always been showing the cat dreaming of a mouse, look at those paws going. There's clearly increased neural activity that can be detected. The dream image is driving the cat's action. But note the interesting dichotomy here. Dreams, you get increased neural activity. Psychedelic experience, lowered neural activity. And Bergson on this? The neural activity via dreams. This is an expression of the ideomotor theory of action that Bergson put out in Matter and Memory, 1896. You have the virtual, the 4D memory. The 4D, remember, in this model, ultimately, all experience is fourth dimensional. You have the 4D experience, or 4D being. And so in that fourth dimension of experience, all is in effect virtual. And then via the intent to bring about an action, you get the image, like grabbing the mouse, and then bringing about the actual action. This was discussed with number 9, or discussed along with this in number 9, interesting correlated phenomena regarding self-induced trance states, self-inducing altered time, and bringing about action, sped up action, like a person in altered trance state, altered time via self-induced trance watching a basketball game, and yet observed making very rapid movements with his hands, and explained later he was eating popcorn while watching the basketball game. Or another individual practicing a violin in altered time and obtaining a vision of the overall piece as though it were a statue. This is all an implication of 4D being. That is Bergson's theory, but a theory that takes the effect of images upon action seriously. And this is likely way out of Bernardo's repertoire, along with the concept of a 4D being coming directly from a model of time's motion as indivisible, as we've seen. The neural activity via images, this is the expression, as I just mentioned, of intent, of will. The virtual, that is 4D being, bringing about an image and the action, the image driving the action. This is the course of intent. This is the mechanism of voluntary action. Images is part of this flow. Therefore, given that images are part of this flow, there must be neural activity. And this is the underlying explanation of our cat dreaming. Because you still have in dreams this relationship of imagery to action. Now, the non-neural activity of psychedelics. Well, let's take the process of recollection itself, recalling something in the past. Bergson argued that this process requires abstracting away, drawing away from the present and its natural call to action. Perception, the present, the natural call to action, this must be suppressed. We must travel away from it into our past to say some particular event, i.e., the cat has to actually travel back mentally, shall we say, to some past, to a particular rat that it caught. My favorite example, Aldous Huxley, who it is said could go into a meditative state and view in detail any page from any book he had ever read. This is the significance of Bergson's planes of memory. The widest plane on the right there, total detail of experience, rich, vivid, every coffee stirring in detail ever experienced. The narrowest is like a concept, an abstract stirring, a cutting through of all the detail to the essence, ultimately to the word coffee. In between, intermediary planes, say less details of some coffee stirrings. For Bergson, this is a radically different model of attention. For those memory rings are also, so to speak, enveloping the perceived object with ever greater detail. We attend to a canoe. The canoe is enveloped, to quote Bergson, by ever-widening systems with which it is bound up. So A, the inner ring, initially maybe just the perception of the canoe, and then B, perhaps an actual detail, a remembrance of canoeing down a certain river or something like that. C might be more stuff yet, and just moving to D, by the entirety and all of our canoe trips being projected to it, and to quote that, in quotes, that canoe. Remember, it's actually attunement to ever more things within the 4D being, which is simultaneously within the holographic field. So to quote, the same psychic life must be supposed to be repeated an endless number of times on different stories of memory. In the effort of attention, the mind is always concerned in its entirety, but it simplifies or complicates itself according to the level at which it chooses to work. So we're talking about an entire mind that cannot be carved up into independent elements, a whole. Now, another view of this, which is also presented in matter memory a little later on, the cone. So at S of the cone, the point of the cone, is the present perception. It's actually our body and a certain sensory motor equilibrium maintained between memory and perception in the body. At AB, the largest cone, or largest circle of the cone, over AB, the entirety of our recollections, every experience of canoeing, everything we've done with canoes, painted a canoe, worked on the canoe, put a new thwart in. Now, a concept at S is a bodily attitude, an actually uttered word, canoe. That's how the concept is expressed at S. And again, as I've been picturing in my picture with the 4D experience or memory or being, that's equivalent to sending a wave, a redintegrative wave through that entirety of experiences, in this case, books, and being expressed as the concept book, and ultimately the word book. So there's a neural aspect anchoring in the neural structure for the word book, but it's also an anchor that's the anchor for an entire wave, shall we say, passing through that memory. At AB, says Bergson, again, is the 1,000 individual images into which it's the concept's fragile unity, be it book, be it canoe, be it coffee stirring, would break up. A concept is this very traverse from S to different layers, shall we say, or condensations of memory to this 1,000 individual images that comprise the particular concept, be it coffee stirring, be it canoe. And this is why concept theory, if one knows its history, is so problematic, because no mechanical theory actually works. So we select the level to the extent we can. Normally in conversation, we're operating at a very small ring, the concept level, abstract, not detailed, at S. The guy says he paddled the canoe, and maybe we have an image of paddling the canoe. But introduce LSD. Our normal sensory motor equilibrium at S is weakened. It's less focused. We're no longer tuned to the present, to the narrow abstract sphere, to action. The sentence evokes an explosion of detail, reverberations of connections. The mind is operating at a new plane, say now the AB plane. This does not imply greater neural activity, but less. The mind is loosened from its tie to neural activity, to action, either real or, remember, perception is always virtual action, so there's this tie there from the beginning. It loosens from its tie to the present. That sensory motor equilibrium is very tied at S to action, always being drawn to action. So all of experience in this model is a seamless whole in and as 4D being. Everything is ultimately related to quote-unquote associated. Paddling, making canoe paddles, carving, axes, lakes, water, fishing, northern pike, lures, fish lines. It is not chunks of things, elements being associated or linked to other chunks or elements, as in this picture of a neural network, or a network of associations, just for the word mellow, where all these things are linked by various weights. Same thing in neural nets, same thing. This is the great error of associationism. The chunks, or rather the elements, are focuses of or differentiations, different modes of accessing the whole. Sending a sentence into this massive experience is accessing the whole in a certain mode, at a certain level of those rings. So the loosening implies less brain activity, less focus. We, the mind, are in the realm of dream, so to speak. We're no longer hooked to the present. But this is an aspect of four-dimensional being. This is that 4D memory there is not a passive thing. It's all of our being. It's still dynamic. Would Huxley have shown more or less brain activity? I guess less. So Bergson, on Deja Vu, that is this sense of having been there, seen something before. Again, this is a form of disruption at S, a diminution of the normal sensory motor equilibrium, or the normal thrust towards action, the future. The present perception is experienced at what it always already is, a memory. And so it's disconnected, dreamlike. Remember, again, the specification is to a past extent of the indivisibly transforming field. That implies that perception is already a memory. And so what Bergson is saying about the Deja Vu experience is that something's gone wrong with the sensory motor equilibrium, the normal connection, the normal thrust to the future, and momentarily we experience the present as though it was what it indeed is, the past. I remind again of the quote I like from Gibson, for he asks, for where in current theory is the borderline between perceiving and remembering? This question, when a percept becomes a memory, this cannot be answered, he says. Well, but the answer in Bergson was there already. Perception is already memory. That's the answer to that question. So again, the point being that, again, we're seeing this disruption, in this case of the sensory motor equilibrium, accounting at least for certain cases of deja vu. So the finding of increased neural activity in the visual areas with LSD, and the rejection of this finding via the other reading of MEG, this may be a premature attempt to resolve things. In my own first experience with LSD, one of two, I experienced a fly buzzing around a whole lot more slowly, not quite heron-like. I was waving my hand slowly at it, or was it slowly? And this relates, in my thought, to perception, or Bergson's perception is virtual action principle. There should be some effect on the motor areas. The visual areas feed to the motor areas, and then the motor areas feed back to V1, modulating the visual information in terms of action, motor information. These are termed reentrant connections. So you have a humming set of areas with these reentrant connections. And this is constraining vision towards possible action. So no theory like this, however, is considered for testing in the academic world. But I'm suspecting that this finding is more significant than they want to admit. This is also correlated with the often reported vibrancy of colors on LSD. So you have a colored glass. And this is also implying a higher energy state. As Bergson noted, 1 second of red is 400 billion wave oscillations, highly compressed, like the wing beats of the buzzing fly, now blurred because those couple hundred wing beats per second are blurred. So like the buzzing fly transitioning to a heron-like fly as the energy state rises, these are waves being spread out in time. The waves of the fly's wings now being spread out in time slowly, just like the waves, the oscillating waves of the magnetic field that is 1 second of red light, now become spread out, hence more vibrant. Again, there's no current theory on this. In current cognitive theory, once the scales of time, you'd get, say, what? And of course, qualia being a function of the scale of time, as we're talking here, Bernardo does not even consider this for his problematic qualitative transition. Now, along these same lines, I once had a reference, can't find it now, in the psychedelic literature, where two folks were reported on LSD and conversing, and the conversation was recorded. And when the recording was played back at normal speed, all one heard is blips. Yet the two stated they understood each other perfectly. Now, I don't know, did the recording make sense when slowed down? I'm not sure they tried. Again, just saying, there's possibly a lot more to this story. Remember, this is coordinate with the altered trance states, where the individual was watching a movie in an altered time and was eating popcorn and was observed to be making extremely rapid movements with his hands from his knees to his face. So there's more to this than I think meets the eye. So how the various compounds each work, psilocybin, LSD, truly work, Lord knows. Then there's DMT, which Bernardo does not discuss, but Strassman did in his Spirit Molecule book, and he thought DMT experience falls into 3 categories. One, people have experiences involving your life, your body. A second, people experience a certain very limited set of realities or realms. One of these being a realm with lab-like settings with alien beings. And the third one being experiences extremely close to near-death experiences. So 3 distinct categories, and the second one being limited realms. The difficulty is the limited realm, the alien experience, for example, is such a common experience, and it's experienced as so real. It indeed appears to be another actual realm, not just an illusion generated by the brain, as all current attempts at solving the Hall problem would view the brain as an experience generator. That is, rather than an illusion, he had held that DMT is tuning the brain to another realm. Perhaps this involves the pineal gland, which people are discovering has interesting, like crystal capabilities. So we'll see, but this tuning is the to heck with orthodoxy position that Strassman very boldly took. So this brings us back full circle. The brain is a reconstructive wave, using all the neural apparatus involved in that brain for registering invariance, for registering those invariance laws, therefore creating the modulation pattern. This is a tuning model. It's tuned to channel normal at our normal scale of time. Disrupting this tuning via LSD, mushrooms, sends you off to realms of mind. The sensory equilibrium is broken, or sensory motor equilibrium. But it is not generating an experience, as are all other theories, except Bernardo and the idealist, for whom other realities just more thoughts of the TWE. But Bernardo has no model of how TWE thoughts are transduced to the image of this reality, be it coffee cups or aliens, to this channel normal. This is his very still existent hard problem. So there's lots of interesting stuff in Bernardo. I haven't done justice. It's definitely a worthy assault on physicalism. What I wish his second PhD had been in cognitive science, specifically perception, with emphasis on the Gibson school, with a Gibsonian as his advisor. Or did I mention a minor in philosophy focused on Bergson? But why not get a third PhD? Now, given all this anti-physicalist mindset, I think things would have gotten really interesting. So next we'll see. Until then, signing off.